Hi everybody, it's Wednesday, April 25th. We are over the hump day. Woo woo, hump day. All right, today we're going to do Unit 11, Lesson 8. This is Chapter 49 in your book. You should read that chapter. If you are to this point and you've completed Lessons 1 through 6, you should have taken your Unit 11 quiz. So if you have not taken the quiz, I would like you to do that now and then come back to this recording. Here is just a copy of this week's schedule. Of course, we are here. We did Lesson 6 on Monday. Yesterday was quiz. Today's Lesson 8. Tomorrow will be Lesson 9, and Friday will be a catch-up day. Okay, here's what we're going to be working on today. We're going to talk about the United States' participation in the Vietnam conflict. And we will identify factors that kept the United States from achieving its goals during that conflict. All right, so we're going to talk about this. The war in Southeast Asia, commonly referred to as the Vietnam War. The dates here are 1967 and 1969, but the reality is this had been going on for quite a long time. All the way back through President Kennedy, all the way back through President Eisenhower and President Truman. Whenever Lyndon Johnson took office and then got reelected, he was the president that really takes a lot of the credit for getting the United States more deeply involved in that conflict. So by the time we get to the year 1967, this war is really escalated and gotten very big, costing the United States millions of dollars. So much so that many of those programs that Johnson created for his Great Society had to be cut because there just was not money for them, because so much money was going to Vietnam. And people at home began to suffer because of this. And so this little phrase kind of came about that said it was more guns or more butter. Guns referred to the investment that we made into the conflict in Vietnam, and butter was all the necessities that we needed for home in the United States, products, goods, and services. And how were we to split the money between those two things? All right, so when we're talking about Vietnam, a lot of people don't really understand why were we involved in the first place. Well, let's go back to way back at the beginning when it first started. There were two parts of Vietnam. We had the Republic of Vietnam in the south, and then we had the Democratic Republic of Vietnam in the north, which was really not democratic. It was really communist. The capital there is Hanoi. In the South, the United States is the ally of the South, and they are the ones that are fighting for democracy, and the capital there is Saigon. So remember how we said after the end of World War II, we launched into what we called the Cold War mostly between the Soviet Union and the United States, but overall it is a fight between freedom and communism. And what Vietnam, this became represented by the conflict in Vietnam, with communist allies like China and the Soviet Union supporting northern Vietnam and the United States supporting South Vietnam. So really, this was a civil war. And what does that mean? Think about that, what that means. A civil war means it's between people within their own country. So we had a civil war in the United States. Other countries did not get involved. But sometimes when there's civil wars in other places, other countries get involved, and that really complicates things. All right, so I have a video that I want you to watch that kind of explains this. The link will pop up here in a moment in your Edpuzzle. And watch that video, then come on back to the recording. Okay, so now you have a little bit of an idea of how that started. Now, all the while, over time, like I said, many presidents were addressing this problem in Vietnam. It was going on for years and years. So before Johnson, Eisenhower and Kennedy both supported the United States involvement in that conflict because they were worried about the spread of communism. Remember that domino theory? If one country falls to communism, many others will also. So when Johnson took over, he was getting a lot of advice from people. Remember the hawks and doves? And many of the hawks wanted us to go to war. And they were telling him, you don't want to look soft. You don't want to be weak when it comes to communism. And what if this guy, Ho Chi Minh, who's trying to make Vietnam communist, what if he turns into another Hitler? So this is what Johnson's worrying about. And he keeps saying, is it really worth us quitting now after we've been involved for so long? All right, so Johnson is really like confused and conflicted over what he's supposed to do. This war is getting bigger and bigger, and he doesn't really know if the United States should be there, and he can't decide what to do. And then this incident happens. It's referred to as the Gulf of Tonkin incident. It happened in August of 1964. And if you take a look at this little map here, you can see this is where the Gulf of Tonkin is located. It's this little water area here. And the reason this is important is because for the northern part of Vietnam, where their capital was in Hanoi, this is where they would use like a port, you know, to move things around the country because of this waterway. So in let's go back and look through what I have here on the board about the history of this area. In 1962, Kennedy had sent 11,000 troops into South Vietnam. By early 1963, we were losing faith and we wanted to start pulling troops out because Kennedy didn't think there was any benefit to the United States. But later that year, he got assassinated. And then when Lyndon Johnson became president, he kind of changed his tactics there. So what happens is the United States has some ships out in the ocean here along the coast of Vietnam. And in 1964, in August, we have a ship sitting there, and somebody says that the North Vietnamese shot a torpedo at that ship while it was sitting in the Gulf of Tonkin. So this incident finally gave Johnson a reason to officially declare war against Northern Vietnam because he says they attacked our ship. So Congress gives all necessary power to Johnson to make that declaration of war. We send over more and more troops over the next few years. And actually, by 1968, we have more than 500,000 troops in Vietnam. So this is known as the longest war for the United States and one of the biggest regrets we have. We had sent 500,000 Americans to do battle far away from home in a country that we had no investment in whatsoever. There was nothing in this for us other than we wanted to stop the spread of communism. And if you read in the book and what you've heard in the video that we've watched here, this was unfamiliar territory for our military. It was a different place. It was very hot and humid in a very dense jungle. And the people there were very different than Americans. We didn't understand the culture, and the way that they fought was very different than the way our military was accustomed to. But the war escalated, and as you read in our book, we dropped more bombs in Vietnam than we had in Germany and Japan put together. And we had a hard time fighting this enemy. Many soldiers struggled with difficult emotional feelings because of how hard this war was. Many became depressed and angry. Many of our soldiers turned to drugs because they just couldn't handle it. I forgot, I'm going to back up here for a minute. I do have a video for you to watch about the Gulf of Tonkin. So I'm going to have that come up on the screen for you now. Go ahead and click the link and watch that video and then come on back. All right, so now that you watched the video, I'm going to move ahead. So by the end of the 1960s, there's so much turmoil over this war going on in the United States because a lot of Americans did not support us being there. So there was a lot of demonstrations in the streets, a lot of young people who did not want to get involved. So they began protesting. And then we had the beginning of what we kind of refer to as the peace movement in the United States during the 1960s. All right, and I have one more video to share with you. It's going to kind of recap the whole Vietnam experience. Go ahead and watch that when the link comes up. When you're finished, come back to the classroom or the recording. All right, so quick check. Answer this question for yourself. Americans wanted to get out of Vietnam because A, it was costing us money and lives. B, we were backing corrupt leaders who were not fully supported by the Vietnamese people. C, we had our own issues to deal with in America and shouldn't be looking elsewhere. And D, all of the above. Which one do you think is the best answer? Absolutely, it is D, all of the above. All of these things about Vietnam are true. Good job if you guessed that one. All right, so I want you to pause the video for a moment and see if you can fill in the answers to these questions. For this last question, you can look in your book. It is in chapter 49. The answer to that can be found on page 215. I would like you to fill in these questions yourself. You can copy and paste them into a Word document and save them for your study guide. All right, once you finish the study questions, you have a graded assignment to do. It is Unit 11, Lesson 8 in your online school. For tomorrow, I would like you to read Chapter 50 in your book. And once you have that done, that's it for today. Great work. I will see you guys tomorrow.